Okay, so welcome to our second week of March Sock Madness at Knit Paper Scissors. And tonight we have our guest speaker is Summer Lee, and I will let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself. But I first of all want to say welcome to all of you that maybe this is your first time with Knit Paper Scissors. We've got a lot of people that are joining us. We've had a lot of new followers on Instagram. And so we are glad that you are with us. We are in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're crazy mad sock knitters. And it started about 5 years ago. So this is our fifth March Sock Madness. And we've always had kind of a little board where we put our finished socks up in March. And the very first year we did 19 socks. Well, when I left the shop today, we had 29 done already this month. So congratulations and thank you for being on this very fun journey. At the end, I'll talk about how if you'd like to take a sock, we have a virtual sock class that you can participate in, and how you can stay on with us and do some other things. So Summer, tell us a little bit about just your knitting, how you got into knitting and kind of where you're from and where you grew up.
All right. Well, my name is Summer and I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've lived in Oklahoma my whole life. I started knitting like 16 years ago, I think. I taught myself on YouTube. And the very first thing I knit was an extremely crooked garter stitch scarf full of holes and drop stitches. And it's a wonder that I kept going because it was the ugliest thing in the world, but I was still motivated to keep going. So I kept at it. I didn't start knitting socks until probably 3 years ago. So that's kind of a new thing for me. But once I started knitting them, I just became obsessed. I mean, it's kind of worrying because that's all I do is knit socks anymore. I used to do other things, but now it's just sock knitting all the time. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basics of how I got started. It's not super exciting, just taught myself on YouTube and kept doing it for years and years. So
did you have any family members that were knitters, or you just had it?
I think that my grandmothers both maybe knit a little bit years ago, but it's not something they did in their later years when I knew them. I think they knew how, like a lot of women of their generation, but I don't think it's something that they did, when I was a kid or anything like that. So I'm kind of the only knitter I'm the only knitter I know. I don't even know any other knitters in person. So
all right. So when you said it's kind of a problem, I mean, I think a lot of people on this Zoom tonight would agree with you. It's just, I don't know what it is about socks. I know we talk about how they're transportable and easy to just pick up and do, but they are so addicting. So you got started. How did you learn to knit socks? And YouTube as well?
Yes. So there is a British knitter. She goes by Winnick Mum. Her name's Christine, and she has a basic sock pattern that I found on Ravelry for free with a tutorial. And so I started knitting socks every month with Christine's pattern. And it was a way for me to try out indie dyed yarn. I could not afford a sweater quantity of it. But I could buy one skein. And I thought, okay, every month I can try a new indie dyer. I can look forward to ordering my one skein of really beautiful hand dyed yarn, and then I can knit a pair of socks with it. And so that's kind of how I started. And the first pair was really awful, ill-fitting. Second pair was a little better. Third pair was a little better. And by the time I'd knit 7 or 8 pairs, I mean, I felt like I could knit socks with my eyes closed. Like I could just do it. And my socks just kept getting better and better, and they fit better. And that's one of my philosophies. One of my things that I advise new sock knitters to do is knit a bunch of plain vanilla basic socks at first. And that'll really help you get good fit. It'll help you get used to how they're constructed. And then you can move on to different stitch patterns and color work, and your mind can kind of be free to get creative and try out different stitch patterns because your fingers know what to do in terms of the construction of the sock. So that's kind of how I started going with it, just knitting a bunch of basic vanilla socks.
Okay, fabulous. So how do you like to knit your socks? Magic loop, double points? I
Magic
mean,
loop all
what's
the way. This is controversial. Everyone has their favorite way to knit socks, and some people love tiny circulars, some people love DPNs. I am magic loop all the way. I fly when I'm knitting magic loop. I love, like, theoretically, I love double pointed needles because I love just, they're so old. They feel so traditional, and I love that. I am a traditional person. I love anything that feels like it has history, and magic loop seems kind of like new and modern, and I don't like that about it, but I just can't get on board with DPNs. I feel like I'm a lot slower and clumsier. So I do magic loop for most of my socks. When I'm knitting color work, I will do tiny circulars because I feel like it's a little less fiddly. I feel like I get nice even tension. My floats aren't too tight, and it just looks smoother overall. But 90% of the time it's magic loop.
and you learned magic loop to begin with. I mean, that's how you started, was right with the magic loop. Huh?
Yeah, that's how I started. Well, I learned my first socks I knit on double pointed needles, and I was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. So then I Googled other ways to knit in the round, and magic loop came up. And the first time I did it, I was like, this is even worse than double pointed needles. Why am I doing this now? But I stuck with it, and once I got the hang of it, then it made sense. And then it was like, oh yeah, this is magic. I love this. But no judgment for anyone who prefers DPNs. I totally get it. The best way to knit a pair of socks is the way that's the most comfortable for you, how it feels to you. So yeah.
Fabulous. And you like Chow needles as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the industry standard. It's the cord that makes such a difference in the magic
Yes.
looping.
I always say if my house catches fire, that's the first thing I'm grabbing is my Chow needles and then running out. Like, I'll make sure my kids are safe, but after that, it's the Chow needles. Like, that's the first thing I'm saving. Forget the pictures, forget anything else. It's my Chow.
So toe up, cuff down.
I am so team. I am a creature of habit. Like, I have been ordering the same meal at Olive Garden for the past 15 years. I don't like change. So once I learned how to knit cuff down, that's what I stuck with. I have knit a pair of toe up socks, and I was just like, no, not for me. So I won't say never. I might eventually design a toe up pattern, and maybe I'll get obsessed with that. But I do what I love, and I love cuff down. So that's kind of what I stick with.
And then what about your heel? What's your heel that your preferred heel method?
So my favorite heel in terms of fit is the heel flap and gusset, because I love how you can adjust it. If you have a high instep, you can make it a little bit longer to give yourself more room across the top of the foot. But my favorite heel to knit, and in terms of appearance, is an afterthought heel. I love the way that they look, and they're so much fun to knit. And I love that if it wears out, you can just cut it out and pop a new one in. So those are my two favorite.
Those are your two favorite. Okay. And, we've too have found we've kind of worked at being exposed to different kinds of heels. So we'll often knit together a heel, a gusset flap, or an afterthought, or those. And I think it's good to be exposed to different things. And then you do know what you really like, the one that works. So how did you go from being you're still a sock knitter, but then the design process, what took you down the design road, and how long have you been designing?
Well, so this is going to be my third full year in business. I started right before the pandemic in 2020. But I started designing because I got sick and could not work. So I was at home, and I was just kind of housebound and needed something to do. I wanted to feel useful. I wanted to feel just that hope when you wake up, like, okay, I've got something to do today. I can accomplish something. And I think anyone who's had a chronic illness probably understands that feeling of, you just kind of feel useless in a way. So designing kind of made me feel like I had a purpose each day. It was something fun that I could try and learn. I loved knitting. Couldn't go anywhere, so I had all the time in the world to sit there and find something. So I got into it that way, really, just because I needed something to do, and my passion was knitting. I loved it, and I thought, well, I've got different ideas in my head. Let me give this a shot. So I started learning the math. I started really, working on writing skills to try and, convey the instructions in a way that would make sense to other people. And I loved it. Like it was just like, wow, I never knew how amazing this was. Why didn't I start doing this 20 years ago? And then socks came about. I actually thought I was going to be a sweater pattern designer because I love knitting sweaters, but then I designed a pair of socks and I was like, man, that was really fun. I'll go ahead and just do one more before I design my next sweater pattern. And so designed a second pair. That led to a third pair. And then after the third pair, I was like, no, this is it. I'm just going to keep doing socks. This is what I love. And so here we are. Like, I don't know how many sock patterns later, they just keep coming. I haven't gotten sick of them yet. I love doing it. So.
And where do you get your inspiration?
Oh, everywhere. Movies, books that I read. It's really moods and feelings for me. My poor husband, like he is so factual and analytical and his brain just works that way. And mine's like, oh, this feels like this or that, and I'm always trying to describe, if something is off because it doesn't feel right. And he's like, well, that doesn't make sense. You have to give me facts. Tell me why it's not right. And that's just not how my brain works. So, I mean, for me, it's just moods. Like I could be reading a spooky book like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And just that mood in the book will make me think of like, okay, a really cool lace pattern or a really cool cable pattern. Colors really speak to me, honestly. I will see two yarns together and then think, oh, I have to design, something for that. I've got to think, something cool for those colors because they're just perfect. So kind of everywhere. It's sort of all over the place. I always say that I have nest brain. Like my brain just feels like a tangled nest and I'm just trying to unravel stuff and figure out, pulling at threads, trying to unwind ideas.
Well, I know that one of the things that I'm attracted to your designs always because of the color, your use of color. And there's just something I think it's almost simple, but so appealing. I mean, you like stripes. You like stripes. Mm-hmm. And I often, when I'm working with knitters, will say, look at just putting colors together and stripes together can create a really striking kind of look.
For sure. Oh my gosh. Stripes have my heart. I love stripes. I have 2 striped sweaters. If I lived in a colder climate, I would probably have 20, but Oklahoma, you don't get to wear wool sweaters a whole lot. So I only have 2, but yeah, I love stripes. I love playing with colors. And that's what I think is so great about socks is that a sweater is a huge investment of time. It's a huge investment of money. And for me, my personality, I would go into a yarn store to pick out yarn for a sweater. I would gravitate towards bright colors and then I'd shy away like, oh, I don't know if I could really wear something that bright. That's kind of scary. And then I'd go for more of the safe, neutral colors. But with socks, they're on your feet, so it doesn't feel that scary to really go for it and experiment with colors. Put, crazy colors next to each other in stripes because it's just on your feet. So you don't have to feel like you're really out there with it. And it's not a huge investment of money. So if it turns out that you knit something and you look at it and you're like, oh, that's terrible. Well, it's not that much money and it's not that much of a big deal to rip it back and start over and do something different because you didn't spend a whole lot of time or a whole lot of money doing that one little sock. So for me, I think socks are great because it is a way to experiment with color and really push yourself outside of your comfort zone and do things that maybe you wouldn't have thought to do before and just try it and see what happens. Not everything that I do looks good. Trust me. Like sometimes I will think, oh, these 3 colors are going to be the best. And then I knit it up and I'm just like, oh, that's why did I ever think that was good? But I'm glad that I tried because now I know. So
now when you're, and if you guys have questions kind of about this, an opportunity to ask about design process and all of those things, because I know that sometimes we think, how did they get to that point? But my question would be, do you swatch and do you swatch it as a sock or do you just knit a sock?
So I swatch for sweaters, but to me, a sock is like a swatch. When you start knitting the cuff onto the leg, I mean, that's basically you're swatching in the round. So I will knit about 3 inches of the cuff to kind of get an idea. Like if I'm doing a particular stitch pattern to kind of see if my numbers are working out, my gauge is pretty much the same. I mean, I've knit so many socks that I know I get 10 stitches to 1 inch of stockinette. And if it's like a cable pattern or lace pattern, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 10, depending on what it is. So I know my gauge by now, like by heart. It's always the same. But when I'm testing out stitch patterns or whatever, I mean, all I do is just to cuff 3 inches of the leg. And if it's good, I keep going. And if it's not working, I rip back and try again. So, I mean, I've always kind of considered the sock leg to be a great swatch to me. So, but I'm a little bit lazy. So maybe other people would consider it a better idea to knit a true official swatch before starting the sock. But
well, I think that is what's nice about being an avid an addicted sock knitter, is you do know, what, that you knit on a 0, you cast on 64 stitches or a 1, and you know what your gauge is, you know how long you like your cuffs, you know how long your foot needs to be to make your heel fit. And one of the things that we've done in Knit Paper Scissors is really work with people to get their fit right, because really a sock is probably one of the most fitted items you'll ever make.
Yeah.
Even over a sweater sometimes has more ease than a sock. And I think that's what some people get frustrated with is, I made these socks and they don't fit. And do you have any fit kind of advice for folks?
So my first piece, which I've already mentioned, is knitting a bunch of vanilla socks so that you resolve your tension. You get used to knitting on tiny needles. Your tension will kind of settle into what it's going to be so that you get the same gauge every time. It also allows you to work on fit. So if you knit a pair of vanilla socks and they're baggy, you need to, size down, knit the next smaller size in the pattern, or you can switch to smaller needles to get more of a fitted foot. If it's too tight across your instep, like the top of your foot, then you know that there's something going on with the heel and we need to do some adjustments on the heel. If it's a heel flap and gusset, you can just knit a longer heel flap, add a few extra rows, see if that helps. With an afterthought heel, for me personally, I always knit 4 rounds even before I begin the decreases on my afterthought heel. That gives me more depth so it fits better and it's not as tight across the foot. If it fits in the calf, like let's say that you knit a sock and the leg fits, really well in the calf, but it's a little loose in the foot, you can always knit 2 different sizes. You can follow the instructions for one size on the leg and then follow the instructions for a different size on the foot, or vice versa. If the leg feels too tight, I usually knit a size medium. So if that's what you've been knitting and the legs on your socks just feel too tight and uncomfortable, go ahead and follow the instructions for the size large. And then after you do the heel, do your decreases down to your normal size medium so that it will fit your foot better and it'll be fitted on your foot, but you get a little more room in your calf. So there are so many different tips and tricks that you can do just to tweak it a little, just to do those little adjustments so that you can get a little bit better fit.
Great. Well, and I think that I like what you're saying, just to be flexible. That's what I hear you saying. And sometimes we get really locked into a pattern and we think I have to knit it that way.
Sure.
And to go ahead and
I get it. I'm a rule follower. I'm the same way. It pains me to not follow directions exactly as they're written. So I completely understand that.
Mm-hmm. I think when you and I talked last week, we talked about one of the things we're knitting, encouraging folks to knit is your Thanksgiving socks. So I have my pair here of my marled yarn, and you said this was a pattern. You want to tell us about your pattern design, and you said you had a fun story with this one.
Yes. So the origin story of this one is, again, I live in Oklahoma. We don't get a lot of really cold weather down here, but when we do, it shuts the whole state down. We don't know how to handle snow or ice, like everything falls apart basically. So the year that I wrote Thanksgiving, we had this freak ice storm in October, and you might remember it from the news because it shut down the whole state of Texas too. Like they were just they were worse off than we were. But we had no power for close to a week. And we had, I mean, temperatures were like 0. It was really, really cold. And so I was sitting on my couch, wrapped up in a blanket, miserable and just super angry because it was just so cold and it was dark and it was just no end in sight. Had no idea when we were going to get our power back. We had branches falling left and right. We couldn't even go out in the backyard to like get limbs off of power lines because they just kept falling. So I was sitting on my couch, just furious. And so of course I needed to knit to like channel that anger. And so I was like, I need a pair of really thick socks. I don't have any socks that are really thick and my feet are so cold. So that's when it came to me like, oh, I should hold, 2 strands together. I don't have a lot of worsted yarn in my stash because most of what I knit is, socks. So I mostly have fingering weight yarn. So grabbed 2 different skeins, started knitting them together and was like, wow, this looks amazing. I love, this effect. I am always late to every party. Marling's been around for a while, but it was brand new to me. So I had no idea, and then you look at like designers like Stephen West, who've been doing it for a long time. And then so many other designers that have done wonderful things with Marling. And I'd never heard of it. I hadn't seen it. So I'm late to every party when it comes to cool trends or things to do. But man, when I discovered it, I was done. I was like, this is amazing. So started knitting 1 pair and then had 3, 4 more flying off the needles and my feet were warm and happy. And then Thanksgiving was the result of that. So that's where that came from.
And they're really fast.
Yeah.
They're really, and I think I had a customer and they said, oh, I think they'd be great in rain boots. So, your wellies and how sometimes they're so big and you need something. And we've got a big snowstorm coming here in a couple of days. So got mine finished so that I can wear them. They are super fun. And I think they're going to be, I don't often knit. Well, I knit for folks that are knit worthy. Right. But I haven't knit socks for other people because of my family. But I would knit these because I think I can make them fast. Yeah. And I think I can get a pretty good fit for them based upon what I know about sock knitting. And I think that they would really enjoy them. So I think this could be on my Christmas to-do list that I'm trying to start earlier. We got a couple questions here. Do you have a favorite yarn?
So I like merino sock yarn, 80-20 blend. Like I'm very specific. That's my favorite blend is 80-20. And I love the merino nylon blend. I do like knitting with non-superwash yarns too, and 100% wool. And I'll get asked about that sometimes like, oh, don't they wear out faster? And they do. But I mean, people have been knitting pure wool socks for centuries and they do produce lovely, squishy, warm. Oh, there's just something about pure 100% wool. So that's my second favorite, but top favorite yarn is definitely merino nylon 80-20. I'm not a huge BFL fan. There's something about the twist. I don't know. I don't like the way it feels. And I don't knit with BFL that often. Again, creature of habit, same order at Olive Garden for 15 years. Once I find what I like, I stick with it. So
what do you order at the Olive Garden?
Fettuccine Alfredo, super basic. I have the palate of a 5-year-old. Give me, Totino's pizzas, macaroni and cheese, fettuccine. It's horrible. I'm the pickiest, worst eater you'll ever meet. It's terrible.
I think fettuccine Alfredo sounds fabulous.
It's so good. I mean, it works. Why mess with it? That's my opinion.
Absolutely. Did you say your gauge is 10 stitches? What size needle do you use?
I use a size 1, unless I'm doing color work, and then I do size 2. But for everything else, size 1. I'm a really tight knitter. I'm a really anxious person, so that translates into my knitting. Oh,
I was going to say a size 1 and you're getting 10 for your gauge. Yeah. You must be a tight knitter. Yeah.
Extremely. Yeah. All that worry and stress and anxiety just goes right into my knitting. And if I'm watching a scary movie, it gets worse. I can't even put that sock on my feet. If it's any kind of suspenseful, stressful thing, then I need to put it down. Otherwise that sock is not fitting because it gets tighter and tighter.
And are there any other tips that you would have that as you think about sock knitting? I know the vanilla and we've talked about that, but weaving in ends, Kitchener versus not? I mean, do you Kitchener to finish your
I
toe?
love Kitchener stitch. I absolutely love it. It took me about 20 pairs of socks before I had it memorized. My brain just did not want to accept the instructions for some reason. So I would constantly have to like, oh, I've got to Google how to Kitchener again. You know, I just did it the other day, but I still don't remember. But now it's finally locked in there. So I just Kitchener with wild abandon. I love Kitchener stitch. Weaving in ends, I am a huge believer when you are doing stripes, when you're doing color work socks, weave them in as you go. It takes a few seconds and you will love yourself so much when you finish that sock because you don't have hardly any ends to weave in. And once you get in a groove, you'll find that it's like you're still going fast. It really doesn't interrupt the knitting. It might at first kind of feel that way, but then you just kind of get in your little groove and knitting those ends in as you go just becomes part of the process. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, RE ends. Definitely weave them in as you go. I know some people don't, and if that's how you roll, that's totally fine. But for me, again, rule follower, and I love things to be, you know, really organized. So that's kind of what I do. It kind of
And
helps with second sock too.
do you do the, oh yeah, the second sock. Do you do the weave and Steven kind of weave in? Is that what you're talking about?
So when I'm doing stripes, I will knit them in as I go. I've watched his Weave and Steven video and it's not quite how I do it, but it looks a lot cooler than how I do it. So I need to actually learn Weave and Steven because it looks more fun than how I do it. But I will knit mine in as I go with stripes. And then with color work, if I'm doing like different sections, like I had a pattern recently that was called the Luca socks. And they had like, I don't know, 15, 16 different colors. And so I was just weaving those in with a tapestry needle. When I'm doing color work, I tend to kind of prefer tapestry needle because I have more control. And I just feel like the fabric lays better versus knitting them in as I go. And there are even certain stripes. If I'm just doing like 3-round stripes, I'll use tapestry needle because I feel like the fabric lays better when I weave it in myself by hand as opposed to knitting them in. So yeah.
And what about jogless stripes? I know you knit so many stripes. So do you care about the
Yes,
jog?
I do care. I am a perfectionist, so I care. So there's two different ways that I do it, and I kind of switch back and forth. One method is to, when you've knit your first round in your new color, you're coming to your second round in your new color. On that first stitch of the second round of your new color, you simply just pick the right leg up of the stitch below it and then knit that with that stitch. And I've got tutorial videos on my YouTube channel where you can see it. It's kind of hard to explain. It doesn't sound good when you try to explain it by words, but when you watch it in a video, it makes a lot of sense. And then another method is just to slip that stitch when you come to it. So just slip it, keep knitting, and then when you come around again, knit it like normal. But that really helps with the jog, I found. So,
Right.
and I've got a tutorial for that too, so you can watch that as well.
Yeah, Summer's tutorials are really good on YouTube. I like the lifted one too. I've done the slip one, and I just think that lift one, it's almost invisible. Really,
Yeah.
a nice stripe. Valerie, are you watching our questions? We're starting to get quite a few questions, and Val was going to help me. Are you off mute, Val?
I did. I just unmuted myself.
Okay.
One of the questions is mine, so I'm going to ask that one first. What is the most popular sock pattern that you have on Ravelry?
So it's Thanksgiving, shorty sock set, and midwinter. Those are the top three that have the most sales, I would say. My husband would know. He does all the math, like the numbers and stuff. He was reluctant at first to, join in to Summerly Design Co. Like, I've got a full-time job, but I think he actually enjoys it now. So he does all my numbers for me, but I'm pretty sure it's Thanksgiving, shorty sock set, volume 1, and then midwinter socks are the top 3.
Okay, great. What is your favorite sock pattern?
Mermaid Avenue will always be my favorite just for nostalgic reasons, because that sock was kind of the one that sort of launched my career as a designer. That one kind of gained a lot of traction, a lot of new followers from that. And that's kind of what set me on this path. So I will always have nostalgic love for Mermaid Avenue because that's kind of the one that made all of this possible. So
Okay,
I'm a very emotional, sappy person. So I attach a lot of feelings to things like.
Okay, Erica would like to know, what is your favorite sock pattern sandal pairing?
All of them. I love socks with sandals. That's my favorite thing. I buy sandals just to wear with my knit socks. But I would have to say color work. I love color work socks with sandals. That just feels so festive and like fun. And if it's kind of nasty outside, or if you're just in a bad mood, if you pair really bright, colorful color work socks with sandals, it just, I don't know, it's such a mood lifter, and it feels very, traditional. Like you feel like people were doing that probably 200 years ago, pairing colorwork socks with sandals to go out and milk the cow, or, do whatever people did 200 years ago, doing their, life was a lot harder back then. So,
Right, right. Anne would like to know, do you have any tips for an aspiring sock pattern designer?
Yes. So if you want to design sock patterns, it's probably because you love knitting socks. And that's the first thing right there that I think you have to have. And then the second thing would be definitely, the math, like figuring out the construction and then working on writing skills. So that would be the second thing. Write out a pattern that you've got in your head and really work on the language part of it, making sure that it's clear and easy for people to understand, and explaining every little thing. Even if you think, oh, people probably know how to do that, stick it in there, because there are going to be people that are newer knitters that may not know how to do a particular technique that seems kind of easy to someone who's been knitting socks for a while. Photography is a big one when it comes to pattern design. You want to make sure that you're photographing your socks in really well lit areas. You want to have soft, natural light if you can. So a lot of times my photography setup looks like a white poster board from a craft store on the floor in front of a window, and getting that nice, soft, directional window light coming in. You just want to make sure people can see it, and then it needs to, be emotionally compelling. I used to work as a commercial photographer for Hobby Lobby. It's a national craft chain that's headquartered in Oklahoma City. So I used to work in their creative department at corporate headquarters. And I learned a lot from stylists that pictures kind of need to pull you in. So even just little things like rumpling the socks a little. It looks like somebody just left them, just kind of placed them in a little pile after doing laundry, and they're going to come back and fold them and put them away. And you can kind of get that feeling just out of an image. So really working on your photography, making sure that everything's well lit, that you're kind of telling a story with your photos, and that you kind of have a cohesive brand for you. All of your pictures look the same, so that people know when they see that photo pop up on Instagram or on Ravelry, oh, that's a summer pattern, or that's, a so-and-so pattern. That consistency really, really helps people get to know you and know who you are and know what to expect from your patterns. I could keep going on this one, but that's probably, you probably need to move on to another question, but that's a really good question. And I definitely think I should do like a blog post or maybe something on Instagram, and I can go even in more depth, because I've got a lot of stuff I'd be happy to share about that. So, and if you want to, you can also email me and I can tell you even more, because I'm always happy to help out anyone who wants to design. I feel like I kind of did it on my own, and I didn't really know anyone in the knitting world to ask, and I had to figure out a lot of stuff. So I would be happy to share anything I know. So feel free to reach out and email me anytime, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Wonderful. That a lot of very good tips. Thank you for that, Summer. The last question, Carol from Sarasota, Florida. We have someone from Sarasota, Florida on here.
Fun.
She wants to know if you have any plans on starting up the YouTube podcast again.
Yes. So my house right now, if you've been following on my Instagram stories, my floors were all torn up. We're getting new flooring put in. And one of the things that I'm doing is putting new flooring in the office that I'm sitting in now. And we're going to turn that into a filming and photography studio. I've ordered lights. I've got a whole setup planned. So I'm going to be doing a lot more tutorials, and then I'm going to be doing a weekly vlog and getting that going. My dad lives right down the street, and he was kind of like the most popular thing about my podcast. So I'm going to try to convince my dad to make a few guest appearances now that we live in the same town. I don't know. He's like the crankiest person you will ever meet. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to try to get my dad to make an appearance. But for sure, that is coming really, really soon.
Oh gosh, I just get excited listening to you, Summer.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Val. I said when we talked last week, I said, now, Summer, what's your last name? So tell the story about your name. I think and tell us a little bit about your family. And
Sure. So my first name is Summer and my middle name is Lee. And then I met a guy named David and his last name is Lee. So my official legal name is Summer Lee Lee. It's ridiculous, but I don't know what the odds are of marrying somebody with the same last name as your middle name, but I managed to do it. So that's my name. And yeah, I've been married to my husband, Dave, for 20 years. He is also a very cranky person. So I don't know, we kind of work because I'm super positive and I'm all into feelings and he's very, very serious and into math and facts, but we have 2 kids. Both of them are teenagers now. So our house is full of a lot of big emotions right now. We've got a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and man, it's wild. It's really wild around here. Thank goodness for knitting. We've got 2 dogs. We've got a husky named Forrest. And if you follow my Instagram, you know that that's the one that hates me and wants nothing to do with me. And then we've got a little mutt dog named Beasley, and she loves me. So half my dogs like me and half don't. But yeah, that's pretty much us.
And have you lived in Oklahoma the whole time?
I've lived in Oklahoma my whole life. I grew up in a really teeny tiny town in the northeast corner of Oklahoma that had 400 people and then a giant feedlot full of cows. And there were about 20,000 cows in the feedlot. So way more cows than people. And then I lived in central Oklahoma for a long time in Norman. It's where the University of Oklahoma is. It's a cool college town. Angie and I were talking about that before. And now I live in Tulsa, and that was an accident because we tried to move to Maine, but we picked the year when housing went like through the roof. And so everyone else decided to move to Maine too. My husband and I both work remotely, so we could kind of live anywhere. And we thought that would be a fun adventure to live somewhere totally different than Oklahoma, but we just couldn't do it. We tried to buy a house and so did 30 other people at the same time. They'd try to buy that same house too. So it was just impossible. So we came back to Tulsa because my parents live here, my brother and sister-in-law. They were helping us. They were looking at houses on FaceTime with us, to help us. And Tulsa's a little greener and a little more Maine-like than where we lived before. So we're new to Tulsa, but not new to Oklahoma.
Sure. And you're remodeling your whole house, right? I mean,
yes,
you're not hiring it done. You guys are doing it.
No, we do I don't know what's wrong with us. I don't know why we do this to ourselves. It's because I'm cheap and I don't like spending the money. So we end up I'm like, if we don't know how to do it, we'll just learn on YouTube. So, yeah, we're doing the whole thing, floors, everything.
Summer, that cuts into your knitting time.
I know. And like, I feel guilty because sometimes like David's doing something really awful, like just truly awful, awful work. And I'm like, I've got to work. I can't help you. I've got to get this pattern out. I don't need to work that hard. I could totally help him, but I pull that card out any chance I get if it avoids doing something disgusting and gross that I don't want to do.
Are you getting ready to release I know you just had a new pattern that came out. What was the name of that one?
So that one's the daily socks. And it was just a really sweet, simple textured pattern that just, you could use color and really kind of go wild with using different yarns. It looks good with like variegated yarn or with solid yarn. That way you could just kind of tailor it to your own personality. And I'm working on my next pattern that'll be coming out later this month is polka dots, because why not? I'm 40 years old and I love, patterns that a 6-year-old would go for. But these are the polka dot socks that I'm working on. So I'm knitting up all the samples and I've got the pattern written. And so, that's my next thing here.
Oh,
are polka dots.
So cool. Oh, we got a sneak peek. That's fabulous. Is your design business your full-time job?
Yes. Yeah, it's my full-time job. I don't know how that happened. I still wake up every day like, what is this? Like, if you had told me when I was 20 that I would be designing sock knitting patterns for a living, I would have just thought that you were on drugs. Like, there's no way that's a real job, but it is apparently, because I do it. And it just, every day I'm so thankful and grateful that people like my patterns. I'm surprised by it still. I don't think there's any way I could ever express in words how much it means to me that there's a whole community of sock knitters out there, and they are kind enough to throw so much support and encouragement my way. And I'm gonna get teary-eyed now. I told you I get emotional very easily, but yeah, it's a huge thing for me for sure. I love it so much.
And you told me at the very beginning about in Japan, they were knitting your patterns, and you said the same thing. You had no idea. They were talking in Japanese.
I have no idea what they were saying. They could have been totally trashing the pattern. I have no idea, but it was so cool to me that there were people in Japan knitting my patterns and talking about them. Like, it just blew my mind. It was that yarn store Walnut Kyoto, and they do Instagram lives, and they have a podcast. And so they were selling kits for the shorty sock set and the Stillwater sock set. And yeah, they were just talking away about my pattern. And again, coming from a teeny tiny town in rural Oklahoma, it just blew my mind. Like, I couldn't believe it. It just floored me. So I'm talking to you in Nebraska, and that blows my mind that there are people in Nebraska knitting my sock patterns. Like, I still can't get over it.
Well, for all the knitters, I'll say thank you. And thank you for writing a great pattern. In your Thanksgiving, we talked about it last week and just talked about the marling and about moving those strands around, and I've marled, but hadn't really thought about moving the strands, and such little things. And that adds so much value to your patterns. And
good.
That, the extra work that you would put into that is much appreciated, as well as all the information. I think we would all say thumbs up on a great pattern. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. I was so nervous when I saw how many people were on here, but I think I made it. So
you made it. I'm gonna go back on gallery, and let's all give her Summer a thumbs up, and a round of applause. Thank you. Summer, just fabulous time with us. And I don't know if you ever come to Nebraska, but
I drive all over the place. I'm afraid of flying, so I drive anywhere I need to go. So I probably will go through Nebraska at some point.
We're not that far away, and now we're getting to where we can have some more events. And in fact, we're having a sock hop April 1st. So that's part of our whole March Madness is our sock hop. Let's have you hold up your socks. I know you're all working on some. Just hold them up. Let's have a little show and tell of everything that you've got going on.
And lots of stripes. That's my favorite.
Yeah. And we're on 2 pages tonight. So wow, those are fabulous. I think it's time to have our drawing. You got entered in the drawing. Summer, if you were here, I would have you pick the name. But we'll just pretend like you're picking. So you got in because you introduced yourself on our Ravelry thread last week and shared some of your goals of what you wanted to do. If you finished a sock this week, you got to put your sock up on the wall, not the sock, but the little paper sock with your name on it. And if you were on last week. So what we're giving away tonight is the Wanderlust for modern day knitting. And this is they put it out a while ago, and it is full of socks and sock patterns and just great inspiration on socks. So we'll be giving this little booklet out for those that are in our drawing. Connie Loudons. Connie, you win the Wanderlust. Yay, the little book. So next time you're in or we see you, yay, Good, good, good. And this week we're going to be giving away the Katrinkles sock rulers. So, and again, I have on my YouTube how to use these, and these are really valuable when you're knitting for other people and trying to fit them. And so many of you have the adult version, but Katie put together the youth version now as well for kids. So if you win and you already have the adult version, then you can select the kid version, because I know many of you want to knit for other people. Let me look at my notes. So how do you get in the drawing this week? Finish a sock. So finish a sock, and then we'll put that up on the wall. Also, you can go on and introduce yourself. If you didn't do that last week, you can get in this week, and or you can go on and share what you enjoyed about Summer's talk tonight, what you learned, what was inspiring for you, what it was that got you enthused and excited about sock knitting. And so go check that Ravelry thread out so that you can see what that's about. Next week, we're going to Jessica's dye studio. So Summer, I think I mentioned that Jessica, this is one of her, she has Lazy Bee yarns, and this was Area 51 vibes. I think this was at the Halloween time. Aren't they beautiful? Really does a nice job. And so Jessica dyes a lot of yarn. We carry a lot of her yarn here at Knit Paper Scissors. And so we're going to her actual studio. I wish you could all come, but I'll go and we'll take the camera, and we're going to be live from her dye studio. So you have a chance to ask her questions, see how she does her dyeing. And it's really a treat to go and see what she does. And then next week we have Ready, Set, Go. So what we're going to do is we'll ring the bell, and then you have a week to knit a pair of socks. And if you knit your pair of socks in that week, then you get a free Katrinkles ball winder. And I was hoping it came in the mail today. It was not there, but it's kind of looks like a paint stick with a little slit in it, and you can wind a center pole ball of yarn. So we have baby bees. Jessica I don't even know where my baby bees are. They're all over. Little baby bees, 80 yards. And so they would be perfect. We use those for heels and toes, and that would be perfect. So you get that free if you knit your pair of socks next Monday. And I know many of you are planning your attack of how am I going to get it done? How am I going to knit my pair? And you know what? I think you can do it. Remember, we did shorties. Summer, we do a June sock camp, and we did shorties. That's where we kind of got started, was with your shorty sets. And we had that where we knit a pair of shorties every week. And we got 3 pairs done. And so then we're going to try that. We're going to knit a full pair of socks, full pair for you. That doesn't mean a shorty. It's got to have a little bit of a cuff, don't we think? And fingering weight yarn for us to do that. So that starts next Tuesday. Gosh, I can't keep track of how fast time's flying. So I think that's all that's on my list. Ready, set, go. So go ahead. You can all take yourself off mute, and that way we can all say at least thank you or hello. And again, Summer, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So everybody, let's tell Summer thanks. And
thank you.
Thanks, Summer.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
It's
you.
fun being here.
Yeah, I'll send you your little thank you package.
Oh, thank you.
To let you see some of these fun colors. Thanks, Summer, so much.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.